Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Without Context podcast. It is a new year, same us, and we are actually going to start the year off with something rather interesting today. Because I feel like a lot of people have had some kind of story in adjacent to this, and also some people might just know it from popular culture and all that. But depending on the hobbies that you partake in, this may be something that is talked about pretty often. Today we are talking about the Satanic Panic, which is kind of adjacent to I think what we're going to be talking about, because it is, I think people have kind of crossed the streams a little bit on Satanic Panic and what Satanism in gaming kind of fell into, which is more of a moral panic. To give a brief rundown here, and just for this part, there will be some content that may be uncomfortable for some people, but it's not something I'm going to go into detail. I'm just going to kind of brush over it to kind of give us like a baseline to work with. Um,
Fucked.
the Satanic Panic itself didn't deal with anything related to gaming or pop culture or really music. It was actually something more involved, the idea of children, satanic cults, ritual abuse. It was this whole thing that people don't actually probably know about. They think Satanic Panic and they think, oh, Dungeons and Dragons is the devil, rock music is the devil kind of stuff. But the actual Satanic Panic itself is far more interesting and a little more messed up in ways. And it was this whole other thing. And that's why I think for this episode, we're kind of be going talk about more how those kind of streams have crossed, how this idea of Satanic Panic was thrown into other things that we liked growing up. Because I was looking at it earlier and I was like, this could be a whole multi-part like deep dive, but I am no
For
longer in high
sure.
school and I am not going to do any kind of reports for this podcast. So
Before we
I'm
get to that, it's been 3 weeks since I've seen you guys face to face.
yes, it has.
I talk about some of the things we got over our time skip.
You guys can see on mine.
Bolt and Brash.
Kristen bought me the Bold and Brash painting, which I thoroughly appreciate. And
I got this.
as an adult, I got clothes, and I'm happy about that. So
We're well into our 30s, and we're like, fuck yeah, clothes.
yeah,
I got this swanky wireless headset.
it is nice.
No wires at all. It's the Arcticus. I forget which brand it is. Steel Series. I shouldn't have forgotten that. It's a Steel Series Arcticus, which is like a solid like mid-range headset. And I think I sound about the same, which is
Yeah,
all I could ask for.
my corded headset is a Steel Series. I really like them.
It's solid. I also got that print right there. This Elshnorn print that you can barely see.
Yeah, and Magic is going to be talked about today. So
yes, it is. So on brand.
On brand.
But that's what I got.
I think my favorite thing that I got, it was a joint present for me and my fiance. His younger brother got us a digital copy of Minecraft for the Nintendo Switch.
Nice.
The best part about the presentation of this gift was we were given a large box that was like wrapped in Christmas wrapping paper. And on the outside was a spork. And the inside of it was gravel, and we had to dig it out. Like we were playing Minecraft.
That's actually really cool. I love that.
It was awesome.
I'm not a fan of Minecraft, but that's actually really cool.
Minecraft has completely ruined my life. All I ever want to do is play it. And it's hilarious in that my fiance likes doing the mining portion of Minecraft, and I like ignoring any facet of Minecraft, and I've made us a barn and collected cows and sheep and chickens and built us a flower garden and other assorted non-essential, purely for the aesthetic building items.
So you somehow went like the last 8 years not playing Minecraft.
Nice. the first time I saw someone play Minecraft was probably in like 2013, 2014.
Yeah, it's been a
And
while.
I don't know if they've changed the textures or anything in that game, but
Little
it
bit.
immediately gave me a terrible migraine. Like I could not look at the screen. But now they've either like polished it or like something has changed where like I can play Minecraft now and it's just real addicting, like even more addicting than the Animal Crossing DLC that I got for myself. So
Nice.
Um,
Yeah, all in all, it's a good holidays. I hope our viewers had a good holiday season. I hope you all had a good new year as we get back into this. Sorry about last week. Post holiday stuff. We still had some scheduling snafus, but what is 1 week? We were on such a
I
good
mean,
roll last year.
you got
So
you got literally snowed in, so you know.
yeah, some of us lost power from like a brief storm. Some of us got snowed in. It was just a whole mess of different things. So nature was like, no podcast this week. So,
Nope.
but yeah. So let's get into this. Like I said, I was looking at the Wikipedia for the Satanic Panic, trying to find in that gigantic document anything about pop culture and stuff like that, and most of it was just the uh everything like involving like the children, satanic cults, all these accusations of things. A lot of it has been debunked, thankfully, but I mean, there was at a point I think over 12,000 reports of it, and it was just something that was grabbed and like just taken on with every kind of group claiming that they're like for the children, and it was like they were going after pretty much everybody. And
How
it's a
many
very
of those 12,000 reports had anything of substance? 0.
yeah, it was all just mass hysteria basically in certain places. But Haley, your perspective.
so it's less of a perspective and less of a fun fact that I know about. So it seems like a lot of this, like from your brief research that you did, Sharky, it probably talked about like the rituals involving like taking kids and then like utilizing them for certain,
Yes,
I
it
guess,
was a
items. Yeah,
yeah.
so that is actually a like, this is a like rough recollection of what I learned very long ago, like a thousands of year old, like very anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that's just like pervasively gone through culture over thousands of years. And it actually, fun fact, played a large role in how the Jack the Ripper case was investigated back in whenever that was, like the 1600s. I
No,
can't
that
remember.
was it was Victorian, so it was like mid to late 1800s.
Oh, right. Victorian. I should know that's my favorite. But yeah, they like utilize that sort of uh like racist stereotype to profile who they thought the Ripper was, and they think that's
Yeah.
part of why we never found out. So it's not a new phenomenon by any stretch of the imagination, and it's kind of having a revival through our terrible friends in QAnon.
That's what I saw. It was like the same 80s like thought process of this is still popping up in QAnon, and I'm like, we just
I
don't
mean,
change, do we,
it's
as a race? Like,
It's the
Nope.
Salem witch trials. It's the Jack the Ripper mishandling. It's the 80s Satanic Panic. It's Jewish space lasers. It's
yeah.
just history is a flat circle.
Time is a
And
flat fucking circle.
the thing that we're going to talk about today kind of branches off of that with this idea of Satanism's sneaking into our culture, and we got to stop it. It's corrupting our children, blah 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 blah, all this other stuff. And the biggest thing was that it was during the 80s mostly. It did go into the 90s. Parts of it are still going on today. Like there's still stuff where people will be like, "Oh, this show is all about Satanism and it's corrupting our kids and all that." Um, I found two articles, and I actually want to look over one of them. Uh, I actually found like this archive for this, and I can't believe this was actually in the New York Times. Um,
Oh, no.
it's an article from 1995. It's called "Fantasy Game Tangles with Reality," and the article is about an after-school club that is put together for Magic the Gathering back in '95. This was at the start of the game, there's probably about 1,000 cards total. It's just it hadn't reached the levels that it did, but it was still immensely popular. And the thing was, it was this whole thing about, these cards, like some of the complaints were like these cards promote, spell casting and all this other occult stuff, and it's like this shouldn't be in our schools. And I'm like, as I'm reading through it, it's just this shit is still happening. Because like when I was in middle school or in elementary school, we got in trouble for playing Pokemon. Like during like recess, it was ridiculous. It was like the same thing as like these aren't appropriate for school. And it's like these are animals, man. These are like just fantasy animals.
They're just pocket monsters, man.
But where is it? I want to so this is just one thing that Chuck commented, because it's like it just shows how, I guess, narrow-minded a lot of these people were when it came to these kind of things, and just how believe how much they believed in this whole idea of it. So the teacher who ran the program sent out permission slips. I'm not going to have your kid here playing it if you don't want them to be. Sign a permission slip if you want them to take part in this club. This woman, her kids brought home several magic cards. When she saw the images on the cards, she became distressed. I don't have to read into these cards. It's all there. It's all satanic and demonic. It's like... And then she took it straight to the school board. So...
Those poor kids.
But it's like, that's 1995. And I found this other article, which is about I don't know if anybody's familiar with James Dallas Egbert.
The name rings a bell.
In 1979, 16-year-old, he disappeared from his room at Michigan State University. He was found in the utility tunnels underneath the university, and he later died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It was all blamed on D&D. Because it was, and it's just like, this thing is like, oh, he's playing at this game. From this article here, quotes, Pulling described D&D as a fantasy role-playing game which uses demonology, witchcraft, voodoo, murder, the R-word, blasphemy, the S-word, assassination, insanity, sexual perversion, homosexuality, satanic-type rituals, gambling, barbarism, blah, 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 blah. And I found in another article, it's like, our research has actually found that D&D people are less, suicidal than other people because they have a place to be. But same thing, it's like the moment this kid who clearly needed help, like he just always had a hard time fitting in, started playing D&D and then died, they instantly went to this game because of the imagery. And it's just one of those things. It's like, it's not, people are so quick to see something without context and instant. And a lot of these people, a lot of these organizations that are, for the kids and all that are just like, I don't like how this game looks. It's bad. It's satanic. This is going to corrupt you. We don't want this in our house. And it's just like, that kind of stuff, can harm a kid. Because it's like, I'm liking the wrong things. So, luckily, I think out of from when it comes to personal experiences, I didn't get a lot of that, even though my parents had me in like a Baptist like summer school program for most of my early years. It was never something that was like, we don't want this in our house. It was never, we don't like how this thing looks. It was just kind of this thing that happened. I didn't even really hear about the Satanic Panic until I was in my teens. So I think Haley has might have some experience, though, being the self-described formerly devout Christian.
Yeah, so
you can't call them Christian; they will fight.
Catholic.
So I was my mom's Catholic. She, I guess now, she was raised Catholic. I would say she's more evangelical Christian these days. but we were raised Catholic, and I was like devoutly Catholic for most of my childhood. And I didn't really encounter anything where my mom was like, you can't have this in the house. If I like the things that I was into as a kid were like Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! And my mom did a good job of like screening things that we would consume. Like I wasn't allowed to see a PG-13 movie until I was 13, and then it had to be approved by my mom beforehand. Same with rated R. And uh she I to this day don't know how I got away with watching Yu-Gi-Oh! To this day, I have no idea. So I was like, I think she probably just thinks it's like Pokemon, but it had like Egyptian god cards that were like real things. And like you could actually go to the Shadow Realm. Like
The
that
Shadow
was a
Realm.
real place you could go.
His trump card was Dark Magician. He had Summon Skull. Like
Little Karibo or the Karibo card. Yeah.
yeah.
But it started, I would say my first interactions with it were in like church youth group. A couple of us brought Game Boys to when we were going through confirmation education. We had to do an overnight in the basement of our church, like a co-ed overnight in a church basement. And I'm like, this is very Catholic. And like we had like a bunch of us like brought Game Boys. So we'd have something to do because we weren't supposed to sleep the whole night or something dumb. And we got our butts handed to us when they're like, you're playing Pokemon, you're inviting Satan and his minions into your heart by playing Pokemon. And we're like ninth graders. So like me and all my friends are just like, have you seen a Pikachu? Like, but it really sort of came into it when I started getting interested in trying Dungeons and Dragons. And just sort of my first baby steps into it, I like didn't mention it to my mom because I was like, this feels like the type of thing she would be upset about.
It's because
And
there's probably that stink of it on it for so many years, like prior to you finding out to me playing it for the first time. It's like I think in the 90s, if you were to say D&D, like certain people would look at you like, "Ooh, that game." Like
yeah, when I finally told her that like it's something that I do with my friends, she like obviously had a lot of questions and was like, what do they mean by like a dungeon master? Like, do they control what your character does? And I was like, oh, they wish they could.
I, I wish I could have a tighter leash on you guys.
And I was like, for me, and like I was like, D&D is really what you and your group of people make it to be. Like if you surround yourself with like decent people, you're like nothing untoward is going to occur in your game. I think she was more concerned about it being a like male dominated space and like was worried about me like rubbing elbows with like crusty neck beards. And I was
That's
like,
fair.
no. It's just like me and some people that I know and trust. And like, why do you think I lean towards clerics?
You found the biggest group of bonobos to play with.
I did. It's really crazy. But the way I'm seeing it manifest now in my adulthood are things that used to be okay when I was a kid are suddenly not okay anymore to my mom and my older sister who's raising younger children. Like my mom read us Harry Potter when I was a kid, and my
Now
sister
it's
isn't
like,
letting her
no,
kids read it because it's demonic and satanic. And I remember that being a thing. Like people wanted Harry Potter banned at school because they're like, oh, it's
Definitely a thing.
witchcraft, it's satanic. And I'm like, no one believes this is a real thing that's happening. Like it's a book about a kid who has a broomstick and casts spells with a wand. Like we know that isn't real. I mean, I read books that probably shouldn't have been in there, not for like demonic reasons, but like, yeah, ban Harry Potter, sure. But even there's a movie, I don't know if it's from like the 50s or the 70s called Bedknobs and Broomsticks. And it
I
has
think I
like,
remember seeing that in my
it has
brief
Angela
research.
Lansbury. It has Angela Lansbury in it. And I bought it on DVD because I found because like it's a really old movie. It's a classic Disney film. And I bought it for my sister and her kids. And she's like, oh, my kids didn't like it because it was satanic. And I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? She's like, they were uncomfortable with all the witchcraft. I'm like, oh, but you're comfortable with them watching Jurassic Park when they're all under the age of 10. All right. So I find Satanic Panic stuff, it's like we were saying, it's a moral panic. It's something is gaining popular prominence that a group of I wouldn't say like closed-minded, just like insulated in their
Yeah.
own sort of echo chamber, see something gaining prominence and then feel threatened in some, like, whatever it is about it threatens something that's deeply held, like a deeply held value to them. And because of that echo chamber they exist in, they only like the only way they can respond is negatively. And it takes a great deal of like emotional and mental maturity to like open up and exit that echo chamber and sort of get an outside perspective. And at least in my experience, being raised in a Catholic church, that is not a thing they want you to do. They want you to remain in the echo chamber because that's where like the way, the truth, and the light is. So you're not supposed to get entangled in earthly affairs or whatever. So
For
it's
yourself?
all
How dare
very
you?
it's all very
Yeah.
silly.
Yeah, it was like one of those things, like when I was looking into it on my lunch break, I was like, this is far more complicated than I think like we're prepared to talk about, because even that whole like satanic timeline doesn't really match up, because apparently like even back in like the 20s and 30s with like jazz getting started, a bunch of
Jazz
angry
music
white
was
people was calling it the devil's music. So it's like it's just
because it was predominantly black musicians.
yeah,
Gee, I wonder why people were
but
panicked by it.
that's what gets me. It's like it's just been this ongoing thing of like it's always been there. But I think the 70s and 80s is when it really hit like a fever pitch, because you have all the rock music that's starting to come out. You have D&D becoming popular among kids. Going into the 90s, you have Magic and the card games becoming popular.
And I
It's
feel countercultures were starting to sort of become less underground with like
yeah.
more access. Like, this is gonna sound really stupid, like MTV gave people access to a bunch of different genres of music on their television back when it did music stuff. And I feel like a lot of when Satanic Panic pops up, this is me putting on my tinfoil hat.
Okay.
There's always some sort of minority at the root of it. So like jazz music was predominantly black musicians.
Yeah.
Oh no, rock and roll started off with predominantly black musicians. And D&D, I feel
Fucking
like
nerds.
D&D, Magic the Gathering are social outcasts, neurodivergent people, just people who don't quite fit in for one reason or another. And whenever these people find a space that's like, okay, cool, we're thriving in here, there's a moral panic. There's
Yeah.
always some kind of moral panic, and the easiest one to fall back on is a satanic moral panic. But there, now I'm taking my tinfoil hat back off.
Yeah, it's like
And we'll
yeah, it's just one of those things. And like D&D, their Wizards response to it was like, we're going to rename uh like the demons. They're no longer demons or devils. They're like the Tenari and the other name for them. Like they decided to slap on actual names, say like this is a species, not demons. Like they completely changed how things did. They put like mature audience labels on them to try to get, kids away from them. And just all this like other stuff that happened. And I mean, you look at some early like Magic the Gathering cards, and yeah, they can be taken that way a lot of the time, including like I think Deca, you might have seen like the older like Dark Ritual cards is very clearly like a dark like ritual happening.
There's literally a card called Chains of Mephistopheles.
Yeah. And
it gets pretty up there.
Yeah, so and around I think like the early 90s too, when I guess people just wanted more, you start getting the stuff like the original Vampire the Masquerade. You get the like original edition of Cult, which is had its whole slew of issues over in Sweden. And all these other like mature role-playing games kind of saying, like, fuck you, we're gonna do what we want to do. And it was like embracing that stuff a lot. but I don't know if it's the need for like a single bad guy. So it's like, oh, it's not you all. It's this guy who's controlling you. He's corrupting you. You're not the bad ones. He's the bad one. Because it's
It's a
like,
very hate the sin, love the sinner.
yeah. And it's just one of those. It's just like one of those crazy things. And I'm thinking, I've been trying all day to find out like other controversies for like pop culture stuff that have uh relations to this, but I was having a hard time trying to find stuff. Most of it falls under just like a moral panic kind of umbrella, and there have been a lot of them.
You know
It's
that
like
you know that you know that guy that's like aliens. It's every time something happens, I just picture that guy, but like
Satan.
Satan. Satan.
Well, think about it in like, hi, you can't see them because they're blurry, but I have a couple of master's degrees. But and like think about whenever there's one of these moral panics, there's some big social change occurring and the
Yeah.
status quo is being questioned. So like that's happening more and more frequently as like globalization is rising. Like we can talk to anybody anywhere at any time. Information has never been more accessible, and so has disinformation, which we've now become intimately aware of. And for especially since like a large, at least in the United States, like a large portion of our population is older, and like mental elasticity is a thing that you lose over time. So like the adage of like you can't teach an old dog new tricks, like they often respond to like massive change with just fear, and then they fall back onto something that makes them feel safe, and then you get moral panics because like generations can't relate to one another. And communication. We've stopped communicating and people just assume, I don't know. I worked a long time today. I'm tired.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Deca. Tell us about
Oh
your
man.
experiences.
So I touched on this a little bit in the Pokemon episode, but I wasn't in the trenches, so to speak, because I was not raised traditionally Catholic. I was around a lot of people who were, like my grandmother, my dad, and my mom.
Yeah, I'm like
Um,
religious adjacent also.
religious
So
adjacent. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. But we were just never taught that way because we was poor, and poor people don't get to do that.
poor people don't get
Anyway,
religion.
they get religion, but they're definitely not on the power dynamic that they should be on. Anyway, that's another topic for another episode, maybe. um, when I remember there being like this little conversation, or I remember there being like the overarching theme of like, are Pokemon cards like demonic? Are they channeling, Satan? You had your little Growlithe last time when we were talking about it. Um, and I remember there being like that little brief conversation when we opened up like some booster packs for Christmas one year. And my family's, I don't want to say progressive. They're not progressive, but they are smart enough to know that little cards with text of like the chunky Pikachu from back then are not going to summon the devil.
Yeah.
So we had the conversation, but it was like, well, that's stupid. Like immediately, it was like, well, that's stupid.
That article that I found about the magic stuff, it's like this is teaching kids how to cast spells and contact demons, and like when the kids were asked about it, it's like we're actually just like learning math and strategy.
Yeah,
That's why I didn't like that game. It's too much math and I hate numbers.
Yeah,
there's a
it's
saying in
just
Magic the Gathering: math is for blockers.
yeah. But it's just like, yeah, it's like this is a what, like 3-inch by 2-inch cardboard. like
I
like
actually have something here. Hey, I am
with
reaching behind me.
some text
Yep.
of a fantasy world. It's not, I don't swipe this in like a card reader or something to summon a demon.
So, over my break, I also got into a new card game. This one is literally called Flesh and Blood. So, if something was ever going to And it's wild because it's called Flesh and Blood because it's not like at first if someone sees that name they're like, oh shit, that may actually be Satanism or whatever. But they called it Flesh and Blood because the people who made the card game made a promise that this game will never go digital, that you will play this game in person in Flesh and Blood. I'm not summoning the devil by casting I'm using
This
Prism as
cleric.
my hero. Yeah, look.
Yeah, it's like D&D cannot be satanic if I'm playing this good college level cleric.
It's an interesting thing that you bring up with your experience, Deca, because like it took a conversation with your parents to just sort of like mutually assuage any concerns. Like your parents were like, this doesn't look completely kosher, and then you were able to reassure them, being like, it's a chubby Pikachu. Look at his little face. Like, and I feel there's like that could be an answer to it, other than like don't be racist.
Sure.
But that's a much harder thing.
We could all just tell people don't be racist. It's not going to work most of the time.
But like I feel when I was a kid, I was able to like sort of communicate with my mom where she's like, Pokemon are real, right? And I'm like, yeah, duh, it's a cartoon on TV. The cartoons aren't real. And then you have examples of where like with the Slenderman case we talked about in at the SCP episode, where like those girls couldn't discern reality from fantasy anymore, and like whether I don't think a conversation was the answer to that problem, but if you have a child that's like, oh yeah, like if I actually cast this, like if I send you to the Shadow Realm, you're actually gonna go to the Shadow Realm, and it's like, whoa. You're playing a children's card game.
There's a few steps you have to go before you get to get there.
You have to get rid of all of their life points.
Unless you're
and then make sure you make that pact before you started the duel, and then you have to make sure you establish it was a shadow duel. Yeah. Then you can send them to the Shadow Realm.
Unless you're Bandit Keith in the Yu-Gi-Oh anime where he lost a game and pointed a gun at Pegasus's head. It's like it's like, bro, it's a kid's card game.
No, he went like this. He didn't point a gun.
In the American one. In the American one, yes, it was his finger, but in the Japanese one, Dishin Man straight pulled out a Glock.
I mean, it did seem like an intense overreaction when Pegasus like Shadow Realm. I'm like, what did Bandit Keith do?
Pointed a gun at him.
Well, one he pulled up on him with a gat. So, also today in the news, we found a mummy that had a fake eye in the same eye that Pegasus had. So, can we not pull the Millennium Eye out of the skeleton, please?
Yugi boy.
It's like,
just.
Does it freak you guys out that Pegasus was like canonically 25?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
Yeah, he was like canonically 25, and I'm sitting here 29, almost 30, and I'm just like,
I can't even interact with people who are like in their teens. It's weird.
What gets me though is that if 2022 is really starting out with the supernatural mummy plot, isn't it? It's like, okay, guys, how can we spice up this season? Bring in the supernatural stuff.
But back to the Satanic Panic. I feel unfortunately like that's going to be a pervasive thing in culture due to the prevalence of Christianity, specifically in America. I can't speak to it in other countries because so much of like Christianity is built into like our systems and processes in this country that like anytime someone first starts to think outside of the box, there's going to be that sort of pushback. And there's no easy answer for it. So you were saying, Sharky.
Yeah, and what gets me is like, it hasn't always been that way. I think it was like the 50s where they made the Ten Commandments movie. Like the original like Ten Commandments movie.
I've seen it.
They were doing like their press tour and they put the monuments in cities. And I think from there you start to see this like slow snowball of people getting back in. It's like, yeah, this is a Christian country. You know, this is like the stuff we need.
It was the Red Scare. The Red Scare.
The Red Scare came in, and it's just like everything.
Moral panic.
It like shot up, and the thing is,
civil
like,
rights, moral panic.
Yeah, your thoughts of there are always going to be this claim that something new is satanic or has satanic subtext to it, it's always going to be that way because there are always going to be the people that have that strong of a belief that they're going to have this predetermined outlook on things.
As somebody who was educated in Christianity from like pre-K till like 9th grade, like Sunday school every Sunday, like Catholic altar kid. I was an altar kid. The thing with like, it's easy to make like satanic and Satanism an easy scapegoat for moral panic and like fear response to social upheaval, because like, I don't know if this is biblically, but this is just what we were taught, was like like the thing that really like jingles I almost said Santa.
Jingle bells.
Jingle, like
Demon
that
Santa.
really hypes Satan up is just like, even to the most like mundane person, which like if I was some kind of evil overlord, like I wouldn't be targeting the everyday person. You can't really like corrupt the masses by like bothering some like broke college student. Like you'd have to go over like government leaders and stuff, but
yeah,
like they're like, Satan delights in turning you from God and will do it any way that he can. So like anything you perceive as a threat, like for example, a member of my family who shall remain anonymous for years has been like, oh, you're not anxious. You don't have like night terrors or sleep paralysis. It's spiritual warfare. It's Satan trying to enter your body. And I'm like, or it's a medical condition.
Or I'm just so fucking stressed out that I'm having night terrors and sleep paralysis.
Or sometimes I wake up, my brain wakes up before the rest of my body does, and I get to just sit there
and
and hallucinate.
And your sleep paralysis demon's like, you okay?
You're doing all right.
You good there, buddy?
You're doing great, kid. You're a pog champ. I literally had my sleep paralysis demon call me a pog champ one time. And I was like, we gotta stop watching people on Twitch.
Gotta stop falling asleep to watching like Twitch streamers.
Valky Ray, I love you, but I gotta turn you off. But yeah, I feel it's the ease. I mean, this is coming from somebody whose like current relationship with faith is complicated to say the least. The easiest thing to blame any problem you have in your life when you come from the type of Christian background, at least that I come from, cannot speak for all of Christianity, would never presume to do that. The easiest thing to blame is always, it's the devil. Something that's making you care more about church or care less about church and more about Pokemon, it must be the devil's work. So I feel, because that it like Christianity and like Christian faith is like a high value in our country, can't talk about anywhere else. Satanic Panic is going to be something that we as a society will be dealing with until the end of time.
I think it also comes down to the fact that if there isn't a cosmic bad guy, then what's the point?
Precisely.
Like, I think the podcast I listened to put it in best. It's like Satan has kept the church in business. So it's like, and that's the thing. It's like you get these people onto these causes. You know, you might convert some people. People who might not think about it start to think about it in a newer way. They come to your side. It's this whole. There's always probably an ulterior motive, more than just think of the kids. What's up, Deca?
We are going to continue to go into religion here, I guess.
Yeah, I looked at the time. We're only about 35 minutes in.
So, when I was about 11 or 12, I almost got baptized at my local church. And they give you a little questionnaire of like, why do you feel like you want to take that next step?
I saw me dunked like a donut. They take the baby and they just like, there you go.
God, that's okay. In some religions they do that, and they just use like a shell and dumped it over my forehead.
Have you seen like how they baptize babies?
Yeah,
like the priest like takes them and like head first them into a pool and then pulls them back out, and I'm like, it's not a chip.
That ain't some guac. That's a human baby.
It's a baby.
So,
it's like Man, you can't dunk it like a donut in coffee, my guy.
Fuck.
It's not the communion wafer into the cup, man. It's a human child. But anyway,
Oh,
Ducka,
man.
your baptism. Your baptism.
God.
Your baptism.
So I wanted to get baptized because from my perspective, I saw how happy it made my mother, and that wasn't enough because I needed to have suffered before, and I needed to be aware of my suffering before I could be baptized. I need to be aware that I am a sinner and need to be cleansed. I have suffered and I have been a sinner and I need to be different. I need to cleanse myself.
Bro,
I don't know why I did this. It would have just
it's like suffering, my guy. I went through 4 years of high school. Like,
I was in middle school in the early 2000s. Like,
yeah, it's like we suffered, but we all weren't that good of kids at times.
I was in middle school when My Chemical Romance hit the airwaves. It was a rough time for us all. But we keep bringing up that, like, one of the core, like, tenets of Satanic Panics is always, like, it's for the children. We're doing all this for the children. And I think that's an interesting target audience in these sort of moral panics, because think about it from, like, a political perspective. Kids have very little agency. Like, they can't vote. They can't really organize protests. They, like, who's gonna listen to a kid being like, Pokemon's fine? Like, using, like, for the kids as sort of a scapegoat adds a level of legitimacy to their own audience, because, like, oh my gosh, think of the children, without actually, like, there being able to be a counter for you. So, like, if they're like, "Oh, we're anti D&D because of the children." So when you're like, "Oh no, I'm pro D&D," then it's, "Oh, you don't care about the children?" Like, you want children to be harmed? Like, it's I don't know what the word, but it's just like a cheap sort of
It's a cheap appeal. I
it's
forget
not
which
even
appeal
an
it is.
appeal. It's just it's easy to make it about kids because kids don't really have the agency or, like, the political power or even the social power to push back against it. Like, you see that less now, specifically in topics of, like, gun debate and the environment. Kids are pushing back now, and you're seeing things are actually, like, they're very fascinating policy areas to look at just from that alone, like, where the push is coming from. Um, but in these sort of moral panics, they take a voiceless body and advocate on their behalf because it's the easiest way to do it. And that's me taking a cynical approach to it. So I apologize that I'm being
You're not
extremely
wrong.
biased.
According to Wikipedia, think of the children's as a cliche that has evolved into a rhetorical tactic. In debate, however, is a plea for pity that is used to appeal to emotion and therefore becomes a logical fallacy.
That's it. The plea for pity.
It's the empathy fallacy and the logic fallacy. We learned about that in public policy in grad school. Like, you can't count, which, like, they're counting on people to feel empathy for children. And even if you don't feel empathy for children, you're going to feel the social pressure to feel empathetic towards, like, a cause for children. Like, you're seeing it play out with, like, the vaccine mandates right now. Like, think of children. I'm like,
yes, I am thinking of the children. I'm making sure they do not die.
exactly. So Satanic Panic and these, like, think of the children for the children, it gives you the quote unquote moral high ground, even if you don't necessarily have it, and makes it really hard for someone to oppose you. Because, like, who's going to do something that feels antithetical to child welfare and not be branded an a-hole?
I will.
Yeah, so just on the topic of, like, groups that pop up, the one that really stuck out to me just because the name is hilarious was one target at D&D called BADD, BADD. Stands for Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
Bothered man, about Moms Against Drunk Driving.
Yeah, this woman, Patricia Pulling, right here out of Richmond, Virginia. Nice.
Yikes.
That's your bag, buddy.
That's not my neck of the Virginia, but that is close. That's about an hour from me, so
it's very close.
Yeah. And Yeah, like just all this stuff. Just I can understand some people's like legitimate concern, like if your kid is taking it too seriously, or like
100%.
if like your kid is like if your kid has a hard time differentiating reality and fantasy. Yes, step in, be the parent. If your kid's going to a friend's house on a Saturday night with good people to play a fantasy game that, yes, might have content relating to that, but they're still, they're not doing anything. They're being a social individual with good people. Then you need to stop and be like, all right, I might not like it, but he's not hurting anybody. He's not hurting himself.
That I think is a core thing, is just parenting.
It comes
Like,
down to
my
they do the extremes. It's either they don't care or they care too much.
Well, they care too much.
You have to have that.
Like,
You have to have the knowledgeable middle.
yeah, and like honestly, like, was it hard for me in like middle and high school to have to be like, oh, I can't come to the sleepover because you're watching a movie my mom hasn't approved of? Yes. It was
Yeah.
brutal. But it was annoying at the time. I hated it. I don't think I was afraid of my mom enough not to like actually disobey that sort of command, because I was like, I choose life. But now that I'm a 29-year-old adult, like, I'm grateful for like that level, like the oversight. Like, my mom cared enough to make sure I wasn't exposed to topics that I probably wasn't developmentally ready for. And I think it's good parenting to like ask your kids questions about their interests and not make assumptions. So
just ask them what
you
they're
were
doing.
saying, like your kids going to D&D, you can totally be like, oh, like tell me a little bit about it. Like, what's your character like? What sort of like what happened at the last session? Like, tell me about the other characters, so that you are learning about your child's interests. They feel safe sharing their interests with you, because that's what happened with me. As soon as I started getting pushback on my interests, I just hid it and did it anyway
Folded. Yeah.
without parental oversight, which could keep me safe. Thankfully, I wasn't doing anything wild and crazy and dangerous, because this was before online gaming.
Mm.
And if I think some parents or some adults in general are too quick to just jump to outrage and then like point the finger outward and be like, y'all are doing this to my child, instead of just listening to their kid and just being like, okay, I see where you're going with this. Here's where I'm setting boundaries for your health and your safety.
Yeah, it's like us in our group. We use D&D as a way to creatively deal with stuff. Like, not something that somebody has personally experienced, but a topic that we can deal with in fantasy without it affecting a real person. Like what's going on with Gwen's character right now and like her story arc. And I just wanted to give you guys the satisfaction of beating up an abuser. But it's like,
yeah, that's cathartic.
But it's
Beat
like
him with a club.
A lot of people go to D&D with a character that is them. Their backstory is them, and it's a constructive way to work through stuff. Like, let's say, like, you know what, I'm going to face this in this environment with people that I trust. So it's like there's a lot of good, but it does come down to the parents themselves. They need to not instantly assume. Just ask questions. Like, who are you gonna, like, if I had a kid and it's like, hey, I'm going out to a friend's house to play D&D. One, I'm cool with you playing D&D. I play D&D. Hell, I'll probably be running the game if we're talking serious. But at the same time, it's like
Fair
okay,
enough.
just one question is, okay, where are you going to be? How late do you think you're going to be?
Whose parents will be there?
It's like, are there going to be any parents there, and who's going to be there? Just, the basic stuff. It's like, I'm not going to hunt you down if you're not home by this, because I know that things can go longer. But I just want to know, like, hey, if you're with him, if I call him, you'll be with him. Like, if you're not answering your phone, kind of thing.
I'm definitely a who's going to be there type of person.
But then it's also
even in my own social settings.
But then it's like, yeah, just if you don't understand it and you don't ask about it, you're never going to understand it.
And it's going to just breed fear.
Yeah, you're going to always be confused about it, or you're going to not be certain because you're not asking, and they're not going to talk to you because if you're not asking about it, they're not going to want to tell you about it. So it's going to come off as secret. It's going to come off as secretive.
And there's no shame, like if like parents are like, hi parents, if parents are listening to this podcast, we're sorry.
I'm
And
not.
second of all, like there's no shame in like having that initial fear response to something new that your child's being exposed to. Like I think that's a good instinct to have. But I don't feel in like any sort of situation you should let your fear fully control your responses. So like, yeah, you can be concerned about what your child is like, what sort of media your child's consuming, but it's going to be better in the long run if you approach it with like curiosity and then concern. And then if it's something that's really bad, like then fear will probably come into it then, but like you're going to develop a healthier relationship with your child if you approach it with like curiosity and concern versus just like, I've decided Pikachu is the devil.
I think it's getting better as the generations go on because one day we're going to be the adults and everything that
we are the adults.
That kids are playing.
Adults.
More adults.
Adultier adults.
I'll say older people and kids, maybe our kids or kids that we know will be playing a new thing that we didn't grow up with, so we don't know anything about it. So it's like
Fortnite.
So you have to be aware that things change, that new stuff comes up. You need just ask. There's nothing wrong with learning something, even if you never do it. So, and it's like I don't talk to my mom about D&D. I just say, hey, I'm running my game. And, I go to my room, I run the game, and then I finish up. And I'm like, yeah, well. But it's like, she's never asked about it. I've never told her about it. It's just one of those things. It's like, I'm not going to just like spill it out if nobody wants to hear about it. But at the same time, it's like, she knows, like, I'm in here. I'm with friends. I'm not doing anything. It's like, I'm not out getting in trouble. I'm not out doing something ridiculous. I'm trying to wrangle a group of bonobos into
I don't
not ruining
that.
things.
I'm a bonobo. I am not a bonobo.
Your character is just you.
Your character is just transfixed
to
you.
an extent. She's much more polite. She's much more polite.
Yeah.
And
but it's like
about the Lord.
It was like that when I played Magic too. It's like, hey, I'm going to go play Magic. I'll be at this card shop. I'll be with these two guys that I'm friends with. Like, I picked them up on the way there. And it's like, people know what I was doing, where I was. It was just one of those things. It's like, nobody asked me, like, how did it go? But people always knew what I was doing. I never hid it. Like, it was just one of those, kind of things. What's up, Ayla?
I have a fun. I don't know how much time we have left, but I thought it might be fun.
Fine.
If we predict what we think will cause the next Satanic Panic. Like
TikTok.
Anything that we think will be coming out soon or that we know of that hasn't really hit like big mainstream, what do you think will cause the next Satanic Panic?
I think
TikTok.
It's maybe, but I also think it's when Marvel gets to the point where they bring in Mephisto, if they introduce like Ghost Rider, where they actually bring in Marvel's devil, basically.
What did you say, Deca?
TikTok.
The whole platform of TikTok, because there are too many free thinkers on TikTok that get to just post whatever they want, and there's legitimately some helpful advice on there.
And it's a Chinese app.
And it's because it's a Chinese app, so you've got the racism in there already.
I'm waiting for QAnon to devour itself. I'm waiting for QAnon to flip their Satanism and go into their Satanism in QAnon.
That would be pretty wild. That would be truly bananas.
If there is a group that will devour itself by that, I think it is QAnon.
I don't know if it's already happened. Like, I'm late to the game on Twitch, but I feel like Twitch is going to have a reckoning at some point.
No, Twitch is just going to... Oh, God, probably. I mean, they're watching anime now. Like, they're watching full copyright stuff on stream.
Yeah, Pokey just got banned. Pokey just got banned over the weekend for just watching Avatar The Last Airbender, but...
Other streamers are calling out people. It's like, hey, you didn't ban them. Why didn't you ban them for doing the same thing? It's like Twitch is about to just implode on itself.
But from like a Satanic Panic perspective, I feel like Twitch is a good opportunity for that because like yeah, on its surface is just like gaming stuff, but like it's not just a gaming platform. Like I've seen people do like scans through Twitch or different stuff, but I just feel like that because it's just you can tune into somebody 24/7 and like not many of those videos like they can get archived or whatever, but I just feel like that might be a place next is like more kids are getting onto Twitch.
Where's the racism, Haley? Where's the racism?
Where's the racism? Oh, the fact that they don't give black TikToker or black Twitch people a platform on that website?
Oh no. I more meant where's the racism from the moral output. I know Twitch is racist as fuck. That's different.
Well. I feel like it doesn't like there has to be some sort of like minority group, and like gamers are. I wouldn't say gaming is a minority anymore, but they're still like these kids and they violent video games. So I would have to say like gaming or like
that's a whole thing that could tie into this, like the whole violence in video game moral panic.
The most depressed race, gamers.
Okay, so behind the scenes stuff, before we started the stream, when you guys asked, do we still want to do this? I did hesitate for a second because I was like, this topic is far more complicated than I think any of us can really talk about. Because it's a thing.
Nuance.
It's a thing, and then it branches into like a dozen other things, all stemming from this same kind of mindset. So I was like, oh fuck, we didn't have enough prep time for this. So
we had 3 weeks. What do you mean we didn't have enough prep time?
I was on vacation.
3 weeks.
Well, we can only speak to our own individual experiences and perspectives.
Yeah.
So like keep that in mind, and like I like as much as I disagree with like motivations and like not motivations, I completely understand and empathize with the motivations behind certain satanic panics. Like if I saw some of those Magic the Gathering cards that you put in the chat deck, I wouldn't want my kids seeing that, just because it's gross and scary. Like I don't watch my fiance play Doom because it's gross and scary. But like I understand like where like the average parent's coming from with that. Like you just want what's best for your kid, and I totally get that. Even though like I don't feel the same way as you, like I get it. I'm not like knocking you because you feel like D&D is satanic. Like if religion is a value, like a core value for somebody, I can't fault them for like wanting to control what media their children consume. So like,
and I don't know why people still say that Doom is satanic when you're killing the demons. Like
I don't think it's satanic. I just think it's disgusting. Like
that's fair.
Like some of the kill shots in that, I'm just like, I love you, my fiance. I love you dearly.
Yeah.
And he'll like, I'll walk in the room and he pauses it, like he knows. He's like, I don't want to see any of it. It's gross. It's too much. Like I get nauseated. It's too much for me. Like I like Minecraft. I like Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley, and The Sims. Like.
Yeah, it's like. It's just one of those things. I think it's just people who need some excitement in their life, and they find an easy thing to like get up and do stuff about. Like, I mean, some people have legitimate reasons, like Patricia Pulling, the woman who started Bad that I mentioned a minute ago. She truly believed that D&D was responsible for her son's suicide. So a lot of it was out of like a personal grief and drive. But then you have some people who are just like, oh, this imagery is promoting it. And then they just like put all their energy into that instead of a more creative or constructive, use and understanding. And it's just people, I guess. Some people just need something to be angry about.
Mm-hmm.
But, kind of a more disjointed episode, but this, like I said, I was looking at this, I was like, this is way more complicated. I would recommend, if people want to actually hear about like the origin events of the Satanic Panic, last podcast on the left did a really good, I think like 2 or 3 part series about it. Don't listen to it at work, I would say. It's not like bad, but the content in it that they talk about is probably not like you don't want to listen to that on your speakers in your workplace. So
That's a little fucked up.
But they do a good deep dive, and they're one of my favorite podcasts, so I'll talk about them till the end of time. But it is interesting. It is a look at how fast a dog pile can happen with minimal evidence just because people are scared, especially when it comes to, you know, their children. It's like if you have reported like, hey, your child's daycare is doing this stuff, you're going to just go in, you know, go in on them, basically. You're not going to like wait to hear another side. It's just one of those things. It's just one of those things. Like people just need something to get angry about when it comes to their kids, I guess.
They're projecting from what might be their own failures at some times.
But yeah, a little bit of a messier episode, but it's our first one of the year. And, you know, it can only go up from here.
We're getting warmed. We're getting back warmed up.
If we hit every week to the end of the year, we will have 51 episodes this year.
Woo!
Can you imagine? You're so muted, Haley. Can you imagine that?
Jeez Louise.
Because we did start late last year, so you guys get a whole year of us this year. So be ready, because I'm pretty sure I want everybody to look at what we are right now and just see how tired we look by next December. So
I want to get a screen cap of don't get a screen cap of me or Sharky. Get a screen cap of Haley right now,
and then
get
like
a screen. And
Haley in January,
Haley
and then just
Haley in January, Haley December.
I mean, I am getting married in May, so I'm sure my stress will rapidly deteriorate, and then I'll perk back up in May, and then
You'll
just
perk up in May, and
deteriorate.
Oh, that's another thing. Another thing we talked about. Haley is getting married this year. Alvin, our co-host, legally is now married to his fiance. They will be having a ceremony later, but they did the paperwork, and we are very happy for him.
So proud of them. We're gonna start buttering our friends up now that we've gotten out of the Satanic Panic.
Yeah. And
Mr. Sarah Wong, I'm so proud of him.
Mr. Sarah Wong. But yeah, it's
my birthday on Wednesday.
It's a good start of the year. And it's Decca's
birthday.
It is a good start of a year so far, and you know, we hope that you guys had a good New Year's, a good start of your year. We hope you have a good year. I know there's still some crazy stuff going on, so stay safe and all that, but hopefully it will get better. And yeah, we need to figure out 51 more topics for this year.
Wait, damn it! It's gonna be Friday when it comes out, so it will have been on my birthday on Wednesday.
Oh yeah, so
you guys can say happy belated on the comments later.
Yes, say happy belated, because we do record these on Mondays and upload them on Fridays because I need 5 days to edit these videos because I'm so. But as always, guys, links down below. You can follow us on Spotify. You can follow us here on YouTube. You can follow us on all of our individual channels in the flow code. And I have been SharkyHat, joined by Deca and AnxietyLasagna. And we will see you guys next week. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.